Hello, fun people! I'm Isaac Carlson, and I'm focused on spreading magic by discussing Disney, and I'm super excited. Hello, fun people! I'm Isaac Carlson, and I'm focused on spreading magic by discussing Disney. I hope you're having a great night tonight, and I don't know if I said that intro twice. It's very difficult to tell when I go live what things are actually happening, because I know that there's some type of delay. I know that there's some type of latency, but I'm really excited to have you all on today to be able to talk about live action remakes, which is a topic that, is a pretty controversial one in the Disney community. It's one of those things where some people really love them. I know family friends of mine with, young daughters, and they really love the live action remakes. Like Aladdin means more to them than the one from 2019 more than the animated version. And so it's this wild world where many people grew up on those animated versions, and now there's people that are, experiencing these stories for the first time and are, really caring about them in a completely similar way to the old animation. So it's this new change in regime, and some are very similar to the original, some are not, and we're going to kind of go through all of that today. But first, I want to say hi to some people that are in the live chat. We got Geeko Chewy. Hello, big fan. Thank you for coming onto the live stream. Ashley Clement, hello. We got Dragon Slayer's Workshop. Woomy, woo. We got Elizabeth Morgan, and Manny Berry. Just so many fun people in the chat. Thank you for coming on. Let me know where you're from, coming to us live. This is so exciting to be able to come and talk to you. There was specifically a reason that I wanted to come on and talk about this, was because there was this article by Insider that was being promoted a lot by Tony Bancroft and Tom Bancroft, who, if you are unaware, Tony Bancroft was the supervising animator on Pumbaa, and then he also directed Mulan. So he's an incredible person. And Tom Bancroft, he was the supervising animator on Mushu. So these are two big animators. They have their own podcast, and they were talking about this article that they were a part of because they were interviewed for it, giving their opinions on live action remakes. So if we pull up this article, it's a very interesting deep dive into everything Disney live action remake. The good, the bad, the ugly, kind of going through it all, and I figured that I would give some of my thoughts about it, and we can have a little bit of a discussion from people that are in Michigan. We got some people from New Jersey, Toronto, international, fantastic. We got one person saying, "You're cheering me up a lot today, Isaac." Well, that means a lot. I'm glad that we can come on and have this discussion together. I'm super excited for it. So last year, Disney made a record $11.1 billion at the box office. That is some serious cheddar for Mickey Mouse. That is for darn sure. And a lot of them were all about these live action remakes. And they've kind of been growing over time. As they described, there was Maleficent, The Jungle Book, and now it's building into Mulan as the next one, which they go into is much more, it's going down its own path in a way that previous films like The Lion King definitely was not. They stuck much more similar, like close to the original story. And so some animators have, come out and described how they influenced these films initially, and now it feels like their stories are just being recreated purely, for money to some extent, and it's not fulfilling the company's values creatively, which some are feeling like that's a letdown to them. We've got Tom saying, "I'm sure I was like everybody else, and why didn't I see this coming?" And I think that's something that's important to remember is that the idea of Disney making money on properties is not something that is completely new. Every few years, they would release their animated classics into theaters. I remember talking to my grandma, and she's talked about how she remembers seeing Cinderella in theaters, and she thought that was the original release. And I'm like, no, grandma, that was like in the 1950s, and she was saying that she had seen it in the 60s. So these movies were constantly re-released. Then with the VHS, they were released over and over, and then there was the sequels that also were released direct to video as well. So there's these examples of Disney capitalizing on their IP, and I think this is a logical extension of it, as these former animators have described. Both of the Bancroft brothers described that Jungle Book was really well done, and that 2014's Maleficent adds to the existing Sleeping Beauty story by telling it from the villain's POV. Which, yeah, it seemed like a lot of the early live action remakes were going in a much different direction. They either told the story in a completely unique way by, showing a different perspective, or like Jungle Book, they kind of they fleshed out as a more adult story. And over time, they haven't done that as much. One of my favorite films in these live action remake eras is Cinderella. I think Cinderella is absolutely fantastic because I think it does a fantastic job of setting Cinderella up as a character, fleshing out her relationship with her father and how that influences her into the future. I felt like we got so much connection with Cinderella. And not that we didn't get that in the original animated film, I just feel like we got a different way of connecting with her. So that was one that really resonated for me, and it's definitely my favorite thus far. But I'd be happy to have one come along that could do better. But I'm also a huge fan of the Disney princess films, so when there's one that comes out that really resonates with me, it gets me super excited. So kind of moving past this, here's this list, which is kind of cool, of all the remakes. You can see that I mean, I wasn't even really aware of this. There was the Jungle Book in 1994. I knew there was one by Rudyard Kipling. I don't know if that's the one, but they had this history already of bringing movies to live action. But you can see that in between 2000 and 2010, there was a huge gap where they weren't doing it. And now they've really started to pick up the pace now that it's having a lot of success. So then they kind of go into how that these movies are providing, some new backstories, that there's an expansion of some of the lore, or trying to clear up different aspects of the story that might not have aged as well. There's the whole idea of Belle trying to teach a girl how to read out, and that she was also kind of this inventor. So trying to add more depth to these characters and kind of revising them. Another great example is of Jasmine, having her have her own ballad, singing independently where she's not, with any other characters, proclaiming that she was, a force to be reckoned with, someone who wouldn't be silent, that the creators felt like that was an important message to insert with that specific character. And let me know down in the chat what your favorite revision was. I really like seeing characters be formed in the way that I always imagined them and being fleshed out more. Sometimes I think it can be a little bit excessive, but there's a lot of times where I think it can be very effective. So then we move on, and they kind of described how they didn't super love the Beast. And in my opinion, Beauty and the Beast was definitely not my top pick for favorite live action remake. Beauty and the Beast, the animated film, is one that I would say is one of the most perfect Disney films. I just loved it so much. I love the music. I think it's a really tight and grand story. And it's one that I always feel so much emotion watching. And I didn't get that same effect when I watched, the new Beauty and the Beast. And that's kind of how I felt about The Lion King as well, is that it didn't have the same type of resonance as it did with the animated version. And that's not necessarily horrible. Like, it's not like every film doesn't have to be like an emotional roller coaster, but watching them back to back, the animated film typically have just more deeper connection with me. And maybe it's part of that is the live action films are, maybe too bloated, or they just don't have the same type of charm that they do in animation. There's, the idea that I've been thinking about a lot is like the form fits the function. This is an idea that I remember back from my AP biology days in high school, that you make something to fit the function that you're going for. So with princess films that have these huge ballads, all of these songs, maybe animation fulfills it better. And there's also the argument, not to go down a deep dive of 2D versus 3D, but that 2D animation is a medium that might fulfill, our aesthetic, our own thoughts that are associated with princess films more than 3D animation. And is there a way to make 3D animated films look like 2D? We've seen that in some, Disney experimental shorts on Disney Plus. Hopefully, we can have more of those types of stories shown, because I would love to see more 2D animated films. I think Princess and the Frog was beautiful, and I'd love to be able to see more of that coming up into the future. But going back to the article more, they kind of talk about Beauty and the Beast a bit more, and then we get Sergio Pablos, who is someone who worked on many films like Hercules, The Hunchback of Notre Dom, and Treasure Planet, and he left the studio and helped create Illumination's Despicable Me franchise, and eventually even directed Netflix's 2D animated hit Klaus. So this is a man who is deep into Disney and then moved over to different studios. And he says that, I really wish they put their energy into creating original content, because that's what I really responded to. We got to work on those movies suddenly, and he's referring to the Disney Renaissance films, and it was exciting because they were new and they were daring and they were doing something new, and it's sad we're not doing that anymore. Now, I wouldn't say that Disney is not doing that anymore, because there are films that continue to have, I love going back to Disney princess films, but that continue to evolve what those films mean for new generations. And there are films that, break away from the mold that's already, pre-established, that I think do a fantastic job of bringing up a new generation of people. I think Frozen has some compelling ideas in it. The idea of sisterly love, I think, is executed fairly well in that film. And I know that there's a lot of sequels and remakes and everything, but hopefully into the future we'll get more of these original films. I must say, I do love when franchises are expanded, but I don't want that to be at the detriment of unique, new, pushing the ideas that are already pre-established, moving forward into different cultures. One idea that I just want to throw out there that I had this revelation about is I love The Lion King. I think The Lion King is one of my favorite Disney films. And I also really enjoyed Black Panther. And one aspect of that is this fascinating culture this African culture. Now, that's kind of an overgeneralization because there's so many countries. It's a massive continent, but there's just so many interesting cultures and like like traditions and iconography that exist. And I just feel like it'd be so fantastic and so cool to see like an African princess. I think that could be so cool to see one come to life. And let me know if you would think so as well. I think it could be so cool to hear Lion King-esque songs and have imagery similar to Black Panther and the Lion King and tie that into a princess. I think that could be so cool. Moving forward, so one aspect of these live action remakes is, you know, they're bringing in a lot of A-list stars. That's something that's typically done in, you know, blockbuster films nowadays. And Tony Bancroft says Lion King was an utter failure artistically, and that he continues to say it was so much like the original. It was the same dialogue, and then to do it in this hyper-realistic style where the characters have no emotion, yeah, I did not like that. And it was cool seeing the story brought up on the big screen. I was with the Super Carlin brothers at their Chicago meetup then, and it was cool to be able to see like Scar doing the same movements and a lot of the dialogue, you know, being said again. It's like, oh, there it is. But after that initial like, oh, I remember that, like it fades. Like it's not as impactful as new stories because you've seen it before. They're not bringing anything artistically or story-wise new to the table. You know, there was little moments that were different where we got to see like Nala escaping with Zazu's help, which was a very unexpected and cool thing. And I wish that there were live action remakes that would tie into the other existing properties that were out there. Like what I mean is, in the Lion King remake, I thought it would be so cool if one of the lionesses was named Zira, or there was a cub named Kovu or Nuka. Like that would have been so cool to acknowledge the fandom that had existed around the Lion King for so long, but it didn't. It just kind of left that story on the side, which I think is too bad. We have Sophia Razanes say, I like the African princess thing. How about a Filipino princess? I think that would be fantastic as well. We've got other people that say they agree with me. We've got the cool guy saying, Wotso's my fave YouTuber. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Gamriska says, Disney Company of Remake. Yeah, there's a lot of remakes. I don't think that the remakes define them necessarily. I think that this is just a phase that they're going through and they're exploiting it to the max. And, you know, whether that's good or bad, I don't think it's necessarily a good move. It's a good move financially, but I just don't want it to come at a detriment to how people are emotionally connected to the company. Like I don't think it's necessarily grand to have, you know, this as the public persona of what Disney represents, if that makes sense. I think what Disney should continue to strive to do is to, you know, have these moments where they acknowledge their rich past and, you know, iterate on it. I think that's fine. And but having these continuous pushes and not emphasizing original properties, I think is a sad idea. Now, coming up, we have a ton of original content. Raya, or yeah, I believe it's Raya or Raya of the Last Dragon looks fantastic. Seeing a little bit of of the concept art behind it is so fascinating. I think that looks so cool. I think Pixar's Soul, I bet we'll have some fantastic and interesting ideas I can't wait to be able to talk about. And I hope they continue to do that. think it's fun to go see Incredibles 2 and Toy Story 4, but I'm excited to have us move forward into the future. So Tom Bancroft goes on to acknowledge that he felt bad for Jon Favreau, the director, because they knew of his potential. We got to see it on The Mandalorian. He can really create some amazing things. And we got to see him work on Iron Man. So he's been able to touch a lot of aspects of Disney properties. And I think he is a good director as well. But they thought that he might have been restricted by what he would have been able to do and change in this iconic story, which is, definitely something that's too bad. They talk about, Tom Bancroft acknowledges that, quite honestly, if they had done Lion King to be a really realistic story, lions that don't talk, I think I would have enjoyed that. I think I would have said, oh, this is not Tom Bancroft talking, this is actually Pablo's. And he was saying that, if they went in a completely unique direction, and this is actually kind of a cool concept because that was the original intent of The Lion King. When it was pitched, it was called King of the Jungle, and that film was going to be a more documentary style film, more akin to Bambi. But then there was some creative differences. They completely decided to scrap it, go into a room, come up with a new story, and they created The Lion King. And so it would have been really fascinating to see something like that take place. And I still think it would have sold. I still think those moments could have happened. Like, there could have been grand moments in this with all of the music and how they behaved. And keep it a tight story, keep it an hour and a half. I think it could have been something truly unique. But that's not the route they went on. They haven't been pushing the envelope too much. They've been playing it pretty safe. But of course, it's been paying off financially, and people still resonate with it. There's moments that people can really latch onto still. But is that because of the merits of the film, the live action film, or is it based off of the hard work done initially? What do you think? I think that there's, that's the type of thing where it's like, this was a fantastic story originally. So adapting it is a much simpler job in some respects. Not that people don't put in tons of effort. You can clearly tell from The Lion King that even though that there were a lot of similar shots within it, that there was a ton of effort poured into creating this property, this huge film. But story-wise, how are we getting, new stories that people can connect to and resonate with? So then the article goes on to explain by Insider why Disney is remaking so many of its animated movies. They're surefire box office wins, allowing the studio to take a chance on riskier original ideas. That is a very, fantastic point, is that this could be one upside of doing something like this over a long or short period of time, is that maybe this will allow more, unique styles of feature animation, that maybe we won't stick with a very similar Disney animation and Pixar style that's been established. Maybe we can push the envelope and change the formula of the style. That could be super exciting. And, maybe that means that there's different live action stories told, or more obscure stories. I think that could be one big benefit. We don't know if that's necessarily what they'll do, but it's an intriguing idea nonetheless. So they kind of talk about how this live action adaptation of classics, slowly was building and over time, and they've been capitalizing on it more and more. Classic. We've all been seeing that take place. And another thing that they point out is that Disney created A Wrinkle in Time, which I don't know if you saw that film, but I went and saw it, with the idea of maybe I'll be able to talk about this in videos and everything. but it wasn't a story I super latched onto, and it definitely wasn't created for my demographic, for me necessarily. And it flopped, and it was based off of a book, and they had already tried it a few years in the past, but it didn't work out super well for them. It wasn't the smash hit that they were hoping for. And with that indicates that they shouldn't do that necessarily in the future. That if you take a risk with something and it doesn't work, then typically what you want to do is make an adjustment. But, you know, that's the difficult thing with creative work. And sometimes I even feel that on YouTube is that you think that this is really going to resonate with people, so you spend a lot of time on it, you produce it, and sometimes it doesn't land. And so you just have to continue to move forward with it and try different things. But typically, if a creative project doesn't work out, you don't want to try and continue to do that. That would be wild. But they talk about in the article, I think it's all about the money and growing the company and making the investors and stockholders happy. It's losing more and more every day, spirit of Walt Disney. Now that's a difficult claim, that this is something that like Walt Disney wouldn't want to do. And I would also want to rebuttal that with Disney survived for many years in difficult times, waves in the history of the company. He did that through having live action movies be created. Is that there was this, that's why there's this massive catalog of very obscure live action films from the 40s and 50s. Is that this was this era of animated films were taking very long to make. They were very expensive. And so Disney was creating tons of these live films. And he was also one of the people that are remembered as being the creators of documentaries, that he was creating these films where people would go out and record bears and different animals, species of animals, and would compile them together into a story. And so these were the different ways that he was supporting his efforts of creating Disneyland and his animated films, was through these other properties. I don't think it's insane to think that in a world where Walt Disney would be alive, that, and I don't want to speak necessarily like I would understand what Walt Disney would want, but based off of how he acted in similar situations, I think it makes sense to leverage the opportunity you have with these creative efforts and go for it. So, but beyond it being a cash, described as being a cash grab, there's also the idea that these are films where you're iterating on the stories and you're, building upon it. And there's this, and they're pointing out as well in the article that we are entertaining and we want you to like the film. We're making money on it to make other movies. So to say something as a cash grab is a detriment. This is the business we're in. Let's see who said that. This was a visual effects supervisor, Rob Legato, who said that. And I think there's a point to be made there, is that every film desires to make money, and the people that are involved in it want it to be successful. It's not like they don't want people to love it like they did the original film. Critics say that it's just a money machine, and that, the heart of all of these films is kind of lost. I don't know if I'd necessarily agree that like all hope is lost for it, especially the company. I think this, this community here, all of us fun people sitting here talking, is a testament to, hey, people still love these properties, and we want just more to love. So I think one very fascinating idea around all of this, though, is this concept of making adjustments to revise it for a modern age. And so when Mulan was being created, from what they've been able to describe in this article, they're saying that this is going to be a much different feeling story, that they're going to be going in a very unique direction with this, and not following the same story structure necessarily. Tom Bancroft, who supervised Mushu, said, a lot of people I know, I think, are surprised by that. Because I created Mushu, I should be really upset that Mushu's not in it. I'm really not. So they're fine with aspects of it being created and updated, and people are very positive about Mulan, which I'm very excited for. I always say that I feel like I have a special connection with Mulan and the Animal Kingdom, Disney's Animal Kingdom in Walt Disney World, because I was born the years they were released. So it's very comforting to hear that the Mulan is being received well. I'm very excited to be able to see it. They also mentioned that Disney won't ever please everyone. That's very true. And that releasing the animated films alongside the remakes on Blu-ray, they've been doing that as well, fully capitalizing on it. But that's, again, like every single release of a film that ever since Star Wars, where the action figures and the toys and the merchandising was all released right in tandem with the movie. That's just the world that we live in, that everything is interconnected, the synergy around it, which I think can be a lot of fun. I like going to Disney's Hollywood Studios in Florida and seeing all of the signs for the new shows, seeing all the movies, seeing that in the buses as well. I think it's a lot of fun, but I'm also deeply immersed in it. I don't mind it. I really enjoy it. So the article continues to finally say, I know all of us that worked on that, we wanted people going back to the original and comparing them because it just keeps it alive. They're talking about how he wants people to go watch the new Mulan film and go back and watch the original Mulan as well and see how they're similar and different, and being able to have that discussion and keep these properties alive, because in a way that these live action remakes are doing that as well. They're keeping these beloved franchises alive. And I think that is a good approach as well. I have my hesitations with them, and I'd love to start reading your ideas in the live chat. What you think of these live action remakes now that we've kind of concluded going through the entire article, and yeah, just where we're going with this in the future. I don't think that live action remakes are horrible by any means. I think they have their good moments, their merits. I sometimes think that they overdo it a little bit, and with how they expand or unnecessarily expand. Like, again, the Beauty and the Beast, I felt like there was times where they added like the book that allowed them to transport to a different place. I didn't necessarily feel like that was something that needed to be included. And if it didn't need to be included, then why did it have to answer the tale of Belle's mother? I feel like there could have been a more natural way to handle that. What M567DK says, Disney live action just feels like an insult to the overall hardworking people that made the original ones. I think that's a good point. We, clearly from the Insider article, there's animators who just want fantastic stories to be created, and if that means revising the stories that they worked on, they can see that moving forward. But they want some vision getting inserted into them, and I think that's a thing that should be asked of these creative companies. Beastly Drohan says, I feel that while Disney has gone overboard with the remakes, they do not tarnish the original films as much as people claim they do. If anything, they highlight the original and keep it original. I think that's a good point, is that it makes you appreciate the hard work that goes into animation, that there's tweaks that could have been made to the original films that could have made it not work as well, and that maybe that can allow all of us fans of Disney animation to appreciate animation even more, that we can understand that this medium is so unique and so powerful. The user Nobody says Pinocchio is very dated. I wouldn't like a remake. Pinocchio, I remember seeing, I think it was a movie called Geppetto. I remember seeing trailers of that a lot. And I don't know if necessarily I would want a Pinocchio remake. I think there could be interesting ways of doing it, but there's a lot of dark imagery in it. I really liked the storybook look of the original. MLP fans says, oh, the chat refreshed, go back up. MLP says, do you think Disney are going to do another hand animated old style movie? I think at some point they will. I think there's going to be some type of return to form at some point, just because it's the legacy of the studio. I can't really see other animation studios pushing it as much, but we've seen that Netflix is willing to invest in 2D animations. I think Disney is going to need someone who wants that really badly to come back. I think it's going to take someone high up who wants that back for it to happen. I don't know if anyone will necessarily be able to pitch something and have it return, unless it's one of the very established directors like John Musker and Ron Clements or something like that. I could see that happening, but who knows? Okami Battle Block says the remakes, in all honest, already all right to do. The remakes, in all honest, all right to do. I think the best route is to remake the films that need to be fixed, like Pocahontas and Brother Bear, and etc. Excuse me. I think there's, I kind of see what you mean, that there's films that feel like they are less up to date than others. And I think you have a good point there. I think that makes sense. I think as long as there's a vision. I don't want to sit on like a question, just like ramble. I just feel like there has to be some type of vision going into it. What's the purpose beyond knowing that it will pull in people? I think that should be at the forefront of these creative decisions when we're moving forward with these live action remakes. Jexy says the Hunchback of Notre Dom also has a lot of dark imagery, or whatever it's called, because English is not my mother tongue. Fair enough. And it will get a remake as well. Yeah, the Hunchback of Notre Dom, I don't even know how that movie could be PG if it was live action. Right at the beginning, Quasimodo's mother gets killed on the steps of a cathedral. It's so dark. He wants to kill the baby. He wants to kill Quasimodo just by how he looks. That sounds like I feel like to do it right, it might be better served as a PG-13 movie, but I have no clue. Oh, okay. Luke Josiah says, maybe if you tell a similar story to whatever original you're remaking and put a good, interesting spin on the story that has a lot of ripples in the story, that would be an interesting remake. I also agree that that's a cool idea, is that, you could frame it as a retelling of a film, but contextualize it in a completely different way. Put it in a different setting, a different land, a different world, maybe alter more aspects of it, create a different situation for people. Tasaya Kaun, I don't know if that's right, I'm sorry if it's not, says the Black Cauldron live action. I think that would be very cool to see. The Black Cauldron is a wild, weird film. I feel like it could be done much better. I don't feel like it's their best work necessarily with that one. It's a very goofy film. I don't think the protagonist is necessarily one who I latch onto very much. It's a wild journey. But yeah, I think that the live action remakes, they have their good moments, they have their bad moments. I think that we just have to continue to watch them or not I'm not saying you necessarily need to support them. I'm just saying we'll have to continue to see how this develops over time. And hopefully if films like Mulan get a more unique treatment and are able to be adapted in a way that's more resonant with the global audience that exists today, then maybe the future will continue to be bright, even if remakes continue to happen. And hopefully they'll be able to fund more amazing animated projects into the future. I think that's a very real possibility. I'm super excited for what's to come. I'm glad that the next film we're getting is Mulan because of how unique they're saying it's going to be. The new villain, removing Mushu, getting rid of a lot of the songs. I think it'll be a very interesting road. I can't wait to continue to be able to discuss it with all of you. Thank you so much for coming on, listening, talking, discussing these live action remakes. And if you liked this live discussion about, this more news-like topic, definitely let me know down below. If there's any topics you'd like to discuss, let me know as well. I am super excited to be able to interact in this way. I think it can be a lot of fun in the live chat on my YouTube channel. I think it is a very cool way to have these conversations that are ever evolving. They're very complicated. So having being able to go through an article that outlines all these points, I think is a cool way to go about doing it. And also just wanted to say that if you didn't know already, I've got a podcast. It used to be called Following Dreams. Now it's Wotso Radio, and Following Dreams is just a series on it. And Wotso Radio is linked, or actually, no, I don't know if it's linked down below, but I will leave a link. It's all of the audio versions of everything I discuss on here. And if you enjoy my content and these discussions, it'd mean a lot if you went and rated the show over on iTunes. And if you're listening to this on Wotso Radio, definitely go do that. I'd really appreciate it. It helps the show grow on a new platform. It's so exciting to be able to have this discussion with you. Thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with me, listening to me. I really appreciate all of you who come on and support the channel, support my dreams, and I hope all of yours can come true as well. Thanks for coming on with me, and have a magical day.